dynamic, and in a way will give them an opportunity to unofficially campaign through their work at the legislature over the course of the next couple of weeks. I do want to mention kind of some numbers you see at the bottom of your slide there. The total number of bills that we actually had going into the original session, the 2020 session, was 1,363. And there was actually 158 pieces of legislation that passed when the General Assembly originally came in the January session. I'm trying to get around so I can see my screen here. The Chamber tracked 309 of those bills. Many of those are still in play and still available to the legislature to take action on. One thing I do want to mention is next week when the House comes back, they have 391 bills on their calendars to consider. That's just next week. Now, of those, about half, 200 or so, have a fiscal note. So those of you keeping track of the budget, fiscal note will mostly take care of those pieces of legislation unless there's something really extraordinary about those. Now, the Senate has about 200 bills or 110 bills that they've passed that the House has not taken action on. So those bills presumably, especially since the House plans to have a little bit more robust conversation around some policies, those bills could presumably pass the House and get signed into law. If you flip that on its head, the House has passed about 50 bills that have yet to have action taken over in the Senate. Real quick on budget, you may recall the original budget that was passed that was considered in January was about $40.8 billion, and kind of the ancillary budget that was passed in March was about $39.8 billion. And from everything we hear, Chairman Lynn can definitely update us on that later, but from everything we hear, it could be as much as $1 billion, $1.2 billion in additional cuts that will need to be made when they do decide to come back. So we want to get into our policy agenda, and we do want to share kind of with you guys for the very first time our policy agenda. And if you look in your chat window, we're going to email you that link. So you will be able to access that, and you can flip through it kind of as we go through it here or later if you don't have an opportunity to flip through it during this presentation. The first one is one that is really no secret: unemployment system. We heard from Lieutenant Governor McNally yesterday that the Senate wants to prioritize our unemployment system and try to keep that fund above $1 billion. You're probably very aware that we are on a reserve ratio system that has several rate tables. And we've been in the highest rate table, table number 6, for several years now, just because of the very, very good solvency of that fund. Now that will trigger again if that fund sinks below $850 million. So it's very promising to hear Lieutenant Governor say that they are considering keeping that fund above $1 billion, and that's great news. And we do believe that some CARES Act dollars could be used to subsidize our unemployment system. Part 2 to the unemployment discussion is actually about the maximum unemployment benefit. We heard Chairman Boyd allude to this yesterday. As you may recall, the Families First Act that was passed by Congress back in late March did give an additional $600 to states as an additional unemployment benefit. In Tennessee, that means $875 per week as a maximum unemployment benefit to unemployed Tennesseans. So that's great. However, it does create a bit of a disincentive as we start to reboot our economy, just simply because a lot of folks can stay home, maybe rather than going back to their jobs. So you're looking at basically private businesses competing with our unemployment system. Like to discuss a little more how that is going to get addressed. liability protections for businesses and other covered entities, as it says in some proposed language, is going to be very, very important for the chamber, probably our #1 priority as we come back. We're going to hear much, much more about that as we progress through the conference today. We heard yesterday afternoon from the education community and the healthcare community. So we're going to hear, really get into the meat of that conversation at the end of our program today. Some very exciting things to mention there. Really 3 pieces on liability protection, looking at a targeted and a timely approach that is going to be very temporary also. So very targeted at just this pandemic, targeted, temporary, and timely. Moving on to workers' compensation. You might have heard in the news that Governor Newsom in California has, through executive order, inserted a presumption that COVID-related claims do qualify for workers' compensation claims. So we're going to do everything in our power. We're happy that Governor Lee hasn't taken any steps like that. We don't expect him to. And we'll also do everything we can to prevent those types of presumptions from being inserted into our Tennessee State Code relative to workers' comp. Now, budget and taxes, that's the big one, and I'm not going to get into it too much or even act like I know too much about the projecting the future on that. But budget is going to be the #1 issue that our legislature addresses when they come back next week, and even more once they convene on June 1st. The budget projections are going to get a little cloudy. In the past, we've had clear projections, really clear F&E projections, franchise and excise tax, business tax projections. This year, we're not necessarily going to have that. Governor Lee, back in March, gave businesses the flexibility to delay payments on those taxes. So really going to get clouded there as we look at projections. And Chairman Lynn, later I'm sure you'll talk about this, but looking at our very first funding board projections, probably the middle of June. So legislature will be eager to see those and probably will delay adjourning until after those projections come in. Some other things on taxes, there was some concern early that local governments would consider property tax raises, increases, as a result of revenue that's been lost through the pandemic. I think it's partly been the opposite of that. We've seen some local governments that have done really well just because of some changes in shopping habits and other things that have kept dollars local and really helped local budgets. The last thing I'll mention are some things that we really focused on in January. And 4 things. The Safe Building Coalition has worked really hard to put together some legislation that that everyone can be happy with, that prevents local governments from outlawing one specific type of building material. We think that's fair, and we think that really levels the playing field for all types of building materials and several chamber members. Another one is workforce development and business education and flexibility, and that really gets to that broadband issue. We want to make sure that rural areas are still taken care of through broadband deliverables, and that our grant program is still sustained at least where it is today. The third one there is the Tennessee CAPS program, which was actually first adopted last year, the first session of the General Assembly. The CAPS program is currently being piloted in about 5 areas of the state, and it really helps make those connections between potential employers and graduating high school students. So it really tailors their approach, and we think there are some good options, funding options coming from the federal government specific to education that could be used for that. And the fourth one is one that's really important to us, permanently establishing Tennessee as a right-to-work state through our Constitution. Back in the 40s, right to work provision was placed in state law, and it's worked very, very well. We want to place that in the Constitution, and this will be the first step to do that by passing it through this General Assembly for the first time, and then it will have to be passed again subsequently in the next General Assembly before it can be placed on the ballot. But definitely want to get that done this session, or we could get delayed 2 years. Lauren, I'm going to stop there and turn it over to you, and you can close us out and introduce our next speaker.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Cecil with the Tennessee Chamber. I'm here to talk about the Economic Recovery Group Subcommittee report. So back in April, Governor Lee asked the Tennessee Chamber to convene 11 working groups to provide recommendations on best practices for reopening. We worked with other leading trade associations and more than 200 business leaders across Tennessee. These recommendations directly inform the guidance in the Tennessee Pledge. This is the first time that the Economic Recovery Working Subgroup report has been released to the public, so you get an exclusive look. Carolyn should be sending a link out via chat, it will also be on our website at tennesseechamber.org. So up next, I'm going to introduce Mark Braden. Get my notes here up. So Mark Braden is a senior vice president with Mercury Public Affairs, a global bipartisan public strategy firm with 24 offices around the world. Mark is a Tennessee native who has operated strategic government relations, public affairs, and political campaigns in over 40 states. Before coming to Mercury, Mark was the campaign manager to Lamar Alexander, Bob Corker, and Richard Burr, and served in a senior staff role for New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. He also served former Congressman Jimmy Duncan as a legislative aide in Duncan's DC office. At Mercury, Mark operates out of the Nashville office and oversees all states' public affairs efforts, working from Alaska to Albany and all points between. He also serves as a federal lobbyist for a diverse roster of clients. Mark, we're happy to have you here. Can you hear us?
Let's see here.
We can hear you.
You can hear me. Can you see me now?
Yes, I believe. Yes.
Technology.
Perfect.
And can you see the let's make sure we got this going. Can you see that going?
Yes, wonderful.
Technology, wonderful. Well, Lauren, thank you so much, and Bradley and Ryan and the entire Tennessee Chamber team for having me, allowing me to talk a little about two things. One, the update from DC, and the second, the kind of politics and how campaigns operate in this day and age. Hopefully informative for both, or at least as you spend your Memorial Day weekend socially distancing with friends and family, you'll at least have some sound a little bit smarter and have a little more information heading into election season. So we will first talk about the federal update and kind of how we see things progressing in DC. Of course, first and foremost, you know, when the coronavirus hit our shores, you know, I think, you know, March was kind of the first month where policymakers started addressing in a tangible way. And the first thing they did was to really stabilize the American economy. The first thing they did was in March 6th was $8 billion for PPE and vaccine. And it was really kind of early. You see here 245 cases at the time, and still unemployment insurance claims were still kind of, you know, still around normal for that time. Fast forward a couple of weeks, they increased significantly, almost $200 billion. Cases have gone up, but and unemployment claims ticked up a little bit. Fast forward, CARES 1 was really the first major injection to over $2 trillion in funding to a variety of needs. When you really saw unemployment claims, again, jump almost 11 times, and cases were almost over 100K. And that really, you really saw for the first time in a long time, a really bipartisan package coming together. It wasn't much horse trading, wasn't much back and forth. It was Washington coming together to really address a problem to stabilize the economy. The next major action that took place was April 23rd. Again, you see kind of the uptick in cases, unemployment claims. This was the big piece of this was replenishing the PPP. And so these 4 major items have been passed. And so moving forward, I didn't talk about the HEROES Act that the Democrats passed last week. The HEROES Act was, it's been called a wish list from House Democrats on their priorities. And so this chart, hopefully, is helpful. Moving forward is the next package will be, they're calling it CARES 2. And you kind of see here everyone's priorities and not a lot of overlap. If you look at, the one thing Republicans are holding strong on is liability shield. And I think it's important to say I think it's very incumbent upon states as we operate, as Lauren said, I operate about, or have operated in about 40 states, not waiting on the federal government to act, but to provide safe harbor or some kind of liability protection in states. It's incumbent to move now, because I think that's really the first step in getting people back to work. You saw Lamar Alexander yesterday talking about schools and colleges, and I think it's incumbent to provide clarity for those folks as well. But the 3 things I want to point out here are liability shield, 4 things: liability shield, PPP and healthcare funding, and then state and local funding. Those are 4 major items that we expect to be addressed in the next CARES 2. But right now, it's kind of a waiting game. Senate's gone home, House is home. The HEROES Act is sitting out there, waiting to be acted upon. But again, Senate Republicans, there's no sense of urgency. The one next change we kind of see coming is Rubio is really pushing an extension on PPP to allow businesses to spend money over a longer time. There's a timeline on it. That's really the next major piece that will probably come back when they get back in June. That will be addressed. But replenishment of the PPP is going to be coming later rather than sooner. There's not a big priority on that we've seen the spending. There was a rush early after CARES 1 for the first phase of PPP. That rush has trickled, and there's the average check is diminished. You've even seen a lot of businesses, even local Tennessee businesses, giving back their PPP money based due to PR concerns more than business concerns. As this waiting game, Democrats are getting increasingly frustrated, and I think you're going to see constituency advocacy groups try to push the Republicans, especially I think Cory Gardner from Colorado, Tom Tillis from North Carolina, and other senators in tough re-elections are, urging Senate leadership to really push things forward, push the timeline up. But today, Chuck Grassley of Iowa said nothing's going to get done until August. Roy Blunt from Missouri said, we're not going to start talking until mid-June. I think the timeline is with the Republicans and really leverages the Republicans right now, as they are holding firm that they want what they want, which is the liability shield. So what happens in our estimation, and sitting here the Friday before Memorial Day, we think a skinny CARES 2. They're going to detangle some strings on the local and state funding, get more funding to local and state, a Democrat priority. They're going to do the liability shield, what that looks like. I think that's where the negotiations come in. I think Secretary Mnuchin is very important in all that. And then more money for frontline healthcare and health workers. So priorities that they share, the PPP will get fixed. So those 4 items I mentioned will all get those are the big 4 things we see moving. Infrastructure is going to take a back seat. I think a lot of these things, I don't think you're going to want to see a lot of things get passed, give either side a win, either way in a big way in an election year. So I think kind of the these 4 items, PPP, fix on the edges, and then these 3 bullets are kind of what we should expect in the next CARES 2. So that's kind of the DC outlook. My email's here, and I would really encourage anybody that wants to, if they don't already get my daily or semi-daily emails from our DC office and a little bit of Tennessee on there, sign up for our daily email. It's in the top right corner, and that kind of gives a real-time update of what goes on in DC, and hopefully it's informative for those that already subscribe to that. Lauren or the chamber, I don't know if any questions on DC before I go to the next slide on more of the fun stuff on politics and campaigns in the age of COVID.
Yep, Mark, if anyone has any questions, just feel free to chat those in your chat window. And Mark, we can ask the DC related questions at the end if that's okay with you.
That's great. That'd be great. Thanks. So next, the politics in the age of COVID, really the fun stuff, in my opinion. You see here the picture is President Trump in Cleveland in 2016 with the balloons, a very normal image. I don't think we see that this year. We don't see a lot of fanfare and given where we're at, and it's a lot of campaigns have had to adjust in their tactics. The strategy remains the same, but I think when you look at from a campaign standpoint, really smart campaigns are going to look at a few factors. One, looking back on previous campaigns, you always try to help people locate their voting location. Where's their precinct? How do I get there? Early voting times, dates, etc. In Davidson County, we have a week of one location, and then it moves to almost 10 around the county. We're going from where do I vote to how do I get my absentee ballot? How do I vote from home? Secretary Hargett yesterday said about 2% of Tennesseans vote by absentee historically. We've seen in other states where we're working on campaigns, that number, the historical number on absentee ballots have really ticked up through this. So, the primary here in Tennessee, you may see more than that. You may see double digits absentee balloting in that election. Historically, it's how much can you give my campaign? Donations and campaign finance is a very important part. It keeps the gas in the tank. It's going to move to how much have you received from the government, going back to the PPP, PR issue. And in addition to, I think a lot of campaigns are moving to Zoom fundraisers, which from a former campaign manager, and I see a lot of folks on here from campaigns past, a lot of times you do a campaign fundraiser with an open bar and hors d'oeuvres and all that fun stuff, but you really don't net a lot out on a fundraiser. And so these Zoom fundraisers are keeping costs down and allowing candidates to spend more time at home rather than traveling across the state to get to a fundraiser where 25 people may show up and you may have a good fundraising night. But a lot of campaigns have moved to Zoom fundraisers or some other format. And lastly, the most important thing in campaigns is can I have your vote? And that has turned to how can I help? And I think you see a lot of candidates and elected officials in campaigns do some smart things. Here are 2 examples. Fox News picked up Burchett in Knoxville, tweeting out his cell phone. First off, if you don't follow Congressman Burchett on Twitter, you're doing yourself a disservice. Go ahead and do that. He's quite the follow. But he tweeted out his phone number to help anybody that needed someone to talk to. Ambassador Hagerty's campaign has turned to their field staff have gone away from canvassing and phone calls to helping in their community that you see here. A couple of their field staff in Anderson County. Other tactics that are affected, get out the vote. At this time, I think we had about 100 grassroots folks knocking on doors for Lamar in 2014. There's going to be no door knocking. Phone calls are going to be the way. Digital is going to be kind of the way forward. Pollsters, our in-house pollster told me yesterday that they're getting more people willing to sit down and take a 20-minute survey than ever before, because people want to, during this time, they want to sit there and talk to somebody and share their opinion on the issues of the day. So pollsters are having more people want to share their opinion. Again, back to mail-in ballots, the mail, direct mail. A lot of people, especially in rural areas, see their mailboxes as kind of the lifeline, especially the past few months, the only lifeline out, and only kind of interaction. So, you know, how does mail, the tone and tenor of the mail, how's that going to look? Digital, of course, grassroots media coverage is all affected. The one that's near and dear to my heart, and I think a lot of folks in here, Tennessee and does a lot of things well, but we really celebrate our critters and our crops. And so, you know, no Mule Day, no soybean festival, no teapot festival, no world's biggest fish fry in Paris got moved the next year. Political norms and traditions that a lot of campaigns mark their calendars every year have been totally pushed out the window. So, you know, these change in tactics are what campaigns are looking at right now. And I think from a business standpoint, how you advocate and how you talk to not only your customers or policymakers, but also your employees could be, you know, there's a lot to learn from here, how campaigns have changed their tactics. And if you haven't kind of changed your tactics, here's some examples of kind of how they have, or you could do the same. What's also changed the political discourse. You know, political discourse during this time, the left, and this is very broad, trying to be nonpartisan, apartisan here, but just giving a broad brushstroke here. The left, trust the scientists, stay at home. The right is saying more, we flatten the curve, we bought into this, time to get back to work, open back up. The left is blaming Trump. The right is blaming China. Again, broad, but you kind of see the differences here between the left. We need to save lives, and the right is focusing on the save the jobs economic message. One thing that both sides have agreed on is a lot of reluctance to sharing any location data with government. In polling, you see that as kind of one of the biggest areas of agreement, both on the left and right, is the hesitancy to share, which is big when we talk about contact tracing and reopening. To continue on the political discourse, the presidential campaign obviously is the biggest focus moving forward for a lot of us. And so I think you'll see Biden and the Democrats really talk about reform. The coronavirus has given us the opportunity to really fundamentally to change the way our economy and our society works, and make it more equitable. You know, you heard a lot of this on the campaign trail. This is also Vice President Biden to appeal more to his base, the new Democratic base, which is more progressive, more in the line of Senator Sanders and Senator Warren. President Trump and the Republicans will be out there talking about, you know, we had this great economy, only a global pandemic could stop us, and let's not change horses in midstream. And I don't think this fits well in a hat, but MAGA, A, Make America Great Again, is kind of the drumbeat that you'll hear for the next 100 some odd days. And so when you know, you kind of, that's the first volley across the net, and I think you'll hear the Democrats and Vice President Biden, you know, talk a lot about how Trump's bad for the country, our standing in the world's been diminished, and the economic success that Trump talks about is what is in spite of him. And not because of him. Republicans will then volley back and say, you know, Biden is not all there. You've already seen this attacks by Trump and his allies, and Biden's record doesn't hold up to what his rhetoric is, especially on trade and foreign policy. NAFTA being one big issue that Trump ran on in 2016, really put Secretary Clinton in a corner on TPP, and so with Biden's decades of record in the U.S. Senate, really expect to see that forensically analyzed throughout the campaign by Trump and his allies. What this all means, to sum it up, this political discourse has caused the right and the left to even grow stronger back in their corner and really harden ahead of 2020. What this creates is less persuadable voters, and actually the persuadable is not vote for Biden or vote for Trump, it's vote. That's the persuasion game that's going to be taken out, is if this becomes a turnout election, which most general elections are. Primary elections are campaigns in shades of gray. General elections are binary arguments. So this election is more than ever, I think, a base turnout election. And you'll see why, as I talk about why I think Trump can win and why Biden can win, why the base turnout is really important. So how does President Trump win? First off, visuals. Going back to Trump, Nixon, Kennedy, the first televised debate, visuals in presidential campaigns matter. And if you look at the two visuals between Trump and Biden for the past month, Vice President Biden has been holed up in his basement in Delaware, doing Zoom calls to not a lot of success, to be honest, with the technology coming in and out. President Trump has gotten back on the campaign trail. He was in Michigan yesterday at a Ford plant. This picture is from Pennsylvania 2 days ago. He's going out there and using the bully pulpit, and you'll see a lot more of this coming forward. I expect rallies to come back in some form or fashion in the next 6 to 8 weeks. He wanted to do one supposedly earlier this month, and was told not yet, but expect more of this. It'd be really interesting to see what Biden does to get back on the campaign trail in person. Online's a big push that I think that Trump has an advantage. You see the numbers here for Biden, and you see how much more reach that President Trump has. His team has been really focused on this from day one, and every time he tweets, or we like it or not, every time he Facebooks, likes it or not, he's reaching more people and able to get his message, good or bad, out there to the American people and to the electorate. But most importantly, to his base of support is who he's really talking to. He's talking to that echo chamber. Both sides really are. Try to harden that echo chamber to make sure they get out and vote. And then lastly, enthusiasm. In a recent CNN poll, 24% of Biden backers, those that are going to vote for him, say, I'd walk on glass for the guy to go vote for him. 1 in 4. For Trump, it's 1 in 2. So this is very important when you're thinking about the work Biden has to do, including the most important pick as VP, given a lot of factors. His VP pick is going to be very important to get that number, that enthusiasm number up. In 2008, when I worked for Senator McCain, we saw that enthusiasm number go up when the campaign nominated Sarah Palin to be our VP pick, and quite frankly, it overshadowed the top of the ticket. And so Biden has a big choice to make, and you'll see that rolling out in the next couple 6 to 8 weeks, I'd say, before the end of summer. How Biden wins, very clear path. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. You could fit the margin of victory in Neyland Stadium and still have room for both marching bands. These 3 states are the ones that if Biden wants to win, he will go camp out in. That's why you see Trump this morning attacking the governor of Michigan, who's a possible VP pick, the Attorney General of Michigan. He's going to be solely focused on Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. But Biden has a pretty easy path if he holds the Clinton states and wins these 3 states. Jobs on the micro, the people's micro economic outlook. You see here, we don't know what the unemployment rate will be in 20, but no president has had a higher unemployment rate the October before the election and won. So the Bush 41, Carter, and Hoover have all had increases in unemployment before the election, and those are the only ones that have ever had it, and they all lost. So it's expected that Trump will have a 3.6%, higher than a 3.6% unemployment. So historical indicators will show that if it is above 3.6%, he will continue this trend, but he might be a trend breaker. He's been a trend breaker since he's gotten into this. And lastly, the economy on the macro. No president has had a recession 2 years before an election and won. Again, Bush 41, Carter, Ford, Hoover, and Taft. I think the macro and the micro economic indicators favor Biden. Among other things, the suburban shift to Democrats, especially in key states. Talked about really quickly, we'll go through this, battlegrounds, talked about Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Important for a number of factors: redistricting ahead of 2021, state Supreme Court in Michigan, and a U.S. Senate race that is on the radar but not considered to be competitive. The 3 biggest battleground states that I look at outside those 3 is Arizona. State Supreme Court race is getting pretty hot there. Competitive race with astronaut Mark Kelly has raised gobbles of money and is favored to beat Martha McSally, sitting senator, to toss up out there. North Carolina, State Rep Rick Tillis' brother, Tom Tillis, is up for re-election in a tough fight against Cal Cunningham, who ran in 2010 and lost the primary but is back. He's getting massive injections from Chuck Schumer and the DSCC. There's also a state Supreme Court race there. And obviously, redistricting is always an issue in North Carolina. I think they've redrawn the lines there 4 times since 2010. And lastly, Florida, because Florida. And then the other states to watch, just kind of a second tier, are these states here. Georgia and Alabama are on here because of U.S. Senate races. Texas, because Texas is looking more and more every day like Virginia, trending towards Virginia and trending away from the Texas we all grew up with. And then Maine's 2nd district is important because Susan Collins is up for re-election, faces a tough fight, but also it's worth 1 electoral vote in the presidential election, which could be a tiebreaker or could be the tie. And then finally, looking here in the state of Tennessee, we've got a competitive U.S. Senate race for the primary. Again, a lot of money being spent. Even the Democrat has already spent $1 million plus. But whoever wins, Ambassador Hagerty or Dr. Setti, the GOP is overwhelmingly favorable to hold the seat. I think if Dr. Flynn wins the primary, it gets pretty interesting. But I would, if betting were legal, I would put my money on Hagerty or Setti to come out as the U.S. Senator come November. The Tennessee 1st congressional district to replace Roe. The last time this was an open seat, I think 22% won it. I think that number will probably be around a lot of people are in it. And, Senator Rusty Crowe is running, Representative Hill. You've got some former mayors that are putting up a good fight. Self-funder up there as well. A lot of money being spent for that district. And so right now it really is kind of a jump ball to first win at 25%, I think wins that race up there. And then here in Nashville, the State House and State Senate, status quo is going to rule the day. Go ahead and send congratulation cards to Yeager, Nicely, and Swan because they face no competition in November or August, so they're gonna be here next year. And then I think status quo, we're gonna have super majorities, and I don't see a lot of surprises out there of people getting upset. And last slide, I'd be remiss anytime talking about what's next is states and is redistricting, something that we spend a lot of time at Mercury, not on redistricting, but focusing our clients on, kind of strategically what happens after this election. You'll have new faces and new places come 2022. And so what happened in 2010, historically, we had a red wave in the midterms. We took back a lot of seats and control a lot of legislative districts. Democrats got smart and decided to fight back. Almost, it was $50 million here in one effort. There'll be about $100 million spent from the left to focus on taking back state legislative chambers. President Obama spending a lot of his equity to get this done with his new committee. And so I think you'll see that be kind of the focus post-election and with regards to drawing the maps from 2022 to the end of the decade. And then here in Tennessee, you'll see based on population growth, you'll see a lot of the districts really move into the center of the state. The largest county in terms of population growth was Trousdale County, oddly enough, but a lot of the big collar counties around Davidson County had a lot of growth. And so you see what that will do will collapse a lot of the districts into the core center of the state and make Middle Tennessee even have more say at the legislature. And you see these two, East Tennessee, Loudon had the largest in the east, and in the west, Fayette had the largest. So you see not a lot of growth compared to Middle Tennessee in terms of that. So, and again, calendar, this is a helpful to have in mind. A couple of things I want to point out. July 4th is expected passage of kind of everybody's looking at to have the next CARES 2 package we talked about early on. Tennessee primary August 6th. And then what I really wanted to point out, early voting. Michigan, one of the biggest states in the country for the presidential, actually starts voting before the first presidential debate. So campaigns no longer look at election day as election day. It's the first day of early voting. And so this provides President Trump and his team a little bit of advantage as they've already, been up and running in Michigan and other states. So, November 3rd might be election day, but a lot of folks are looking at September 19th as the first day folks are really voting in a key state like Michigan. So that's the end of my presentation. So, email address is here. Anyone have any questions that either come up either this afternoon or over time as things happen in DC, more than happy to connect you with our bipartisan folks in DC that are in this fight and work along. So more than happy to connect, answer any questions or point folks in the right direction as things heat up either in DC or come election time.
Thank you, Mark, and very good remarks. We actually have several questions we would like to get to you, but we may have to do those offline just because of time and our schedule. So if it's okay with you, we will get back either in the chat window if you've asked a question, or just get back to you directly. I think we know most of you. So Mark, thank you very much. I'm sure everybody else who's joining us through Zoom really appreciates it. If I knew how to get applause for you right now, I would do that. But sure, everyone out there appreciates it. We got great feedback in the comment window there. So thanks again, Mark, for joining us and for your insights. Our next speaker is Chairman Susan Lynn, who we alluded to earlier. Chairman Lynn was first elected to represent her district, District 57, which is that Lebanon, Mount Juliet area, in January 2003. Chairman Lynn is the first woman to serve as chairman of the prominent Tennessee House Finance, Ways and Means Committee in either the House or the Senate. That's a position she was first appointed to by Speaker Cassida and then later reappointed by Speaker Sexton earlier this year, late last year. She's led with great distinction there, and throughout her tenure, she's very capably passed a number of instrumental pieces of legislation and continues to be one of the legislature's biggest business advocates. And she's also going to be a key part of leading Tennessee successfully through our budgetary challenges that we are facing. Chairman Lynn, thank you very much for joining us here, and we are so glad to have you.
Hi, thank you very much, and thank you for including me in this presentation. I'm happy to talk about the state budget. As we know, the numbers are going to be rough. I am fortunate, though. I was here during those Bredesen years. Those years were extremely lean, and I remember a lot of the techniques that the administration used to get them through those times. And it was very difficult. In fact, a bunch of us sat down and we just brainstormed, what did they do? How did they do it? And we just made a little list of many of the different things that they did to try to save money. And we may not have to do everything on that list, but we certainly will do some of the things on that list. Before I talk about the budget when we come back, let me just remind you about what we did back in March. We were on our way to passing a $40.7 billion budget, which was really, I think, Governor Lee's heart. So much of our governor's vision for our state and his actual heart was in that $40.7 billion budget. And then suddenly COVID hit, and it was shocking. And over a weekend, we cut over $1 billion out of that budget. And that is quite a remarkable feat, I can tell you. We ended up passing a very quick $39 billion budget, very lean. We took most of everything out of Governor Lee's budget. And the budget, basically it recognized that the projected November growth will likely not happen. It reduced the expected growth rate from 3.75% to 2.5%. That was our range. We reduced it to anywhere from 3.1% to a low of 0.25%, and that's actually what we passed. Now, when we go back, we can make adjustments, but we passed a growth of 2.5%, which is pretty remarkable. We did keep in salary increases for state employees and higher education employees, but that increase was reduced from 2.5% to just 1.5%. The amount for the state contributes for local teacher pay was actually increased in our budget that we passed in March by $58.7 million, and we are providing a 2% increase for teacher pay. And of course, that's the state portion. There's always some confusion because there's a county portion. So the state's portion is going up by 2%. We also included a $20 million for market rate salary adjustments. For the emergency response, we realized that the state will need some money immediately for emergency response. So we not only amended last year's budget and included some money for that, but we put some money into the 2019 budget. Now, of course, we see that the federal government has provided a tremendous amount of money for our emergency response. So that will all be very, very helpful. But we included $150 million to an emergency and contingency fund that we set up for health and safety. We also put in a total of $200 million in grants for cities and counties, so $100 million for cities, $100 million for counties, to be used for IT hardware upgrades or capital maintenance, their utility system upgrades or public safety, and also for their COVID-19 response. And we included $30 million for TEMA for the disaster relief from the tornadoes. My district and several other districts were hit very hard by the tornadoes. Homes were destroyed and businesses were just devastated. And they are happily, thank God, rebuilding. We want them to come back. I don't know that they're all coming back, but we certainly want to help them as much as we can. We included $33 million in additional capital emergency and contingency funds to help repair damaged state buildings. And then we still left in money, $1.6 million, to establish a 4th Tennessee Emergency Management Agency region that will be based in Chattanooga. Another thing we did was we put $350 million towards our rainy day fund. It was only going to be $50 million in the original budget, but we thought better of that, and we feel that may be needed. That will bring our rainy day fund up to $1.4 billion. And then, of course, we are maintaining the 10-care reserves at $390 million. Of course, this economic blow here has been really devastating to our state. The high or unemployment claims in April, 1 week, 116,000 claims were filed in 1 week. And so you will hear all over, golly, my claim hasn't gone through, I can't get help from unemployment. When you have numbers like that, the employees are really overwhelmed. The computer system doesn't work perfectly. And I know I've had a tremendous amount of calls to my office. In our Middle Tennessee, or Northern Middle Tennessee region, 7,768 new claims were filed in just 1 week in our region, the week of May 16th. 7,700 new claims. that is tremendous. And that's just northern Middle Tennessee. And southern Middle Tennessee is 1,300 claims. So in response to that, the governor and the Department of Labor hired 30 more liaisons to help with that. And those liaisons were amazing. I've had a lot of phone calls to my office, and those liaisons really knocked it out and got people receiving their unemployment. There was tremendous confusion with the self-employed folks because our system is not set up to handle people who are a 1099 contractor. And the federal government did say that they could receive unemployment. So that was a difficulty. I still have a few people contacting me who are 1099 contractors. And so we are trying to get them helped as quickly as possible. But the unemployment rate for April went to 14.7%, whereas in March it was 3.3%. So that's an over 11% growth, which is, just a shock to Tennessee's economy, the national economy. We are experiencing an economic shock right now. Tennessee's, basically we lost 376,000 jobs between March and April. And the largest increases, and I know there's probably a lot of people on the call right now who can testify to this, the largest decreases, or job losses were in the hospitality and leisure industry, manufacturing, and professional services and business services sectors. So, there's a lot of people on this call who work in those sectors, and they can probably testify that they have seen that. But with March, we did go into this in March, but still March collections were 6.2% over last year. Now, we were expecting them to be about 8% more than last year. So you see a little bit of a decrease there. It still hadn't hit hard. However, and also March is the 8th month in the fiscal year, and it largely reflects economic conditions from February. So take that for what you will. Therefore, March collections, for the most part, pretty much weren't impacted by the COVID-19. It's really April's collections. And don't forget, in April, the administration said that the whole income tax can be put off until you don't have to pay your whole income tax until July. The franchise and excise tax was also put off, and the business tax and some other smaller taxes were extended out. So folks didn't even have to file a report. I feel like it would have been helpful if they had to file a report, and then we would know what the collections might be, but they will be filing at the end of July. So we created a new budget number with the passage of our budget, and to hit the new budgeted number, we would have to see a loss of no more than about 4.5% or $237 million for the remainder of the year relative to the last budget year. We have a concern that these last 3 or 4 months represent about 40% of total collections. And don't forget, when the numbers come in July, they're really reflecting June. So, we're considering now that we have to wait. We won't know until July, when we then see June's numbers, how things are happening. So the legislature, we employ a staff of economists and accountants, and we call them the Fiscal Review Office or the Fiscal Review Committee. And the staff's general fund estimate presented to the State Funding Board back in November was $13 billion, or 5.1% growth versus the previous year. And we were well on our way to hit that target with total growth for March, likely exceeding 8%, but it was 6.2%. So to hit the Fiscal Review Committee's number, Like I said, we needed approximately 5.75 billion for the remaining 4 months of the year. We need 4.8 billion to hit budget. So relative to the initial expectations by staff, we could be under collected by as much as $891 million. So that's almost $1 billion for the last several months of the year, and still meet our budgeted number. So if those revenues come in, $891 million, we could still meet our budgeted number. But truly the loss of revenue in the last 3 months will be significant. So opening up our state, getting people back to work, encouraging people to use the proper social distancing and use masks when necessary. I've seen some people driving around in their car with a mask on and they're all alone in the car. You know, that's not necessary, but certainly it's common courtesy and, you know, good protection for others to wear a mask if you're going to be in close proximity for any reason out in public. Absolutely. So the estimates to the extent of such loss vary greatly at this point. We're going to have a much better picture in the next 3 or 4 weeks. And so when we go back on June 1st, we're really looking for those June 15th numbers to know what we will have to do. We did pass a budget. We could certainly just live with that budget. Will we have to cut more? If we have to cut more, there's already considerations being made. The governor has already asked commissioners to come up with further budget cuts and to have that ready so that we can look at those cuts and consider them. You know, another thought we might could do is leave the budget as it is and not sine die, and maybe come back in September or October, and we can see if the economic activity is increasing in Tennessee and if collections are greater than we fear. So there's a number of options. We are open to any of them. These are extraordinary times, absolutely extraordinary. I've had a lot of phone calls from, you know, bill sponsors, from folks in my community who were hoping legislation would pass, from industry lobbyists who wonder, gosh, will my bill with a fiscal note be able to pass? I just want to be honest right now, don't count on it. Please, you know, tell folks this is a year where we really have to buckle our belts. And if we can pass it though, if things are looking up, certainly we will put a priority out there. We do have some legislation that actually saves money in finance right now. It is in finance sub, and we will likely be passing that. Those bills were put behind the budget. We will likely utilize those savings in any changes that we do. So hopefully we will get some good numbers on June 15th. We just don't know. I know for myself, I work for a company in Mount Juliet. I'm the company controller, and we fortunately did not shut down. We mostly have rental properties, and you can't shut down a rental property. There's no purpose to that. And we have car washes, and car washes were deemed to be helpful because you're cleaning things. So those things were kept open. I thank the Lord that all of these employees got to stay employed and keep working. And I know that a number of businesses did stay open. So we'll see. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the numbers are. The businesses that had to close, so many, you know, personal friends of mine, voters who contacted me who had lost their jobs. It just absolutely kills me. It just tears my heart out. I honestly, I really don't think there's anything worse than when someone doesn't have a job. It is so you just question your own value. It's depressing. Having a purpose, having something to work for is so wonderful. And I know this whole event will make us all very grateful, so much more grateful for our jobs, for the things that we do, and, able to provide for our families. It's, it's really been tough. And the people on unemployment, I just keep encouraging my constituents, call me. I have the hotline. I can get someone to call you and help you with your unemployment claim. And very few people have been turned down. Just a couple of weird situations that we've had to work with. And one person had quit their job to start a new job, and then because of COVID, the new job didn't happen. That's awful. That's a real difficulty. So we try to work with those things. But I'm happy to take any questions. I do see our governor is waiting in the wings, and I know you probably want to hear from him. And as I was just complimenting him before, and the excellent job that they have done, they have kept us so apprised. I've been sending out information that they send me, and people thank me for the information, and really a lot of that has been coming from his team. They've done such a great job. And he's opening the state back up, and he's making sure that everybody does it safely. And we hopefully will get Tennessee's economy roaring again.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Chair Lady Lynn. We greatly appreciate you. I know when you talk back about some of the hard times the state has gone through, whether it was 2008 or 2001, we've certainly all been there together with your history in the legislature, and we appreciate your service. I'm now going to introduce Governor Bill Lee. I'm sure you all will join me from wherever you are across our great state in welcoming our next speaker, someone who has been unexpectedly challenged with some of the most difficult decisions any Tennessee governor has really been faced with in quite some time. We're going to welcome the Honorable Governor Bill Lee. Governor Bill Lee has had tremendous support from the business community and Tennessee Chamber. He is a strong ally of our vision to create a prosperous, strong economic climate with limited regulation. Tennessee has frequently been noted throughout his tenure, not only as one of the states that have weathered the COVID crisis extremely well, but I know he's been on a number of public shows and has talked about Tennessee's plan for reopening, and a number of other states have looked to follow those plans. Aside from demonstrating his tremendous confidence and leadership throughout the pandemic, he's also focused on a number of other priorities, including in more normal times, that's good jobs, great schools, and safe neighborhoods, a message that really resonated all across Tennessee for Tennessee's economic growth. In addition, Tennessee, under his leadership, has been named the #1 best fiscally managed state in the country, which the business community is extremely proud of that. The best business climate in the U.S., #1 in the nation for advanced industry job growth, and the best state for small business growth. These are tremendous accomplishments, and Governor Lee, we thank you so much for your work and for joining us today.
Thanks, Bradley. Thank you for having me on, and thanks to everybody on this call. Your membership in the chamber, but more importantly, your contributions to the livelihoods of Tennesseans. As a former business operator, 25 years ran a business, 35 worked there. I know that what you do changes people's lives in running a business, and I know that it's been really interesting for me to be in the spot of being governor after having spent 25 years in business, knowing how government can be either a hindrance or a help in the way we run our businesses. So it informs much of the way I view policy. And so I appreciate the businesses that are on this line. Many of you I know. And have worked together with over the years. So thanks for what you do. And thanks for being part of this historic and interesting time that we have. And I say being a part of it because the private sector is what's going to bring us forward and restore economic prosperity. And it won't be because the government does it. It will be because companies and businesses respond in a way that brings back consumer confidence and allows people to re-engage in our economy. A couple things I'll say just about the whole COVID experience. Certainly, that's something that none of us knew was coming. We certainly knew about it before it got here, but the degree to what was coming, in fact, how it would manifest itself, what were the right decisions to make at the right time. They were, for me as a business owner, the idea of government requiring a business to close was almost unthinkable, except in the wake of an impending crisis, a imminent public health threat that requires that, whether it's evacuating for a hurricane or, sheltering at home from an active shooter, or implementing restrictions to keep people from moving around in what appeared to be a imminent danger to the people of Tennessee. Those are some of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make in my life, because I know the implications for those business owners and for their employees. And we worked really hard to make the right decision at the right time based on data. I have an engineering background, so my default position is to defer to and to evaluate data in order to make decisions. It's one of the reasons I think our state was one of the last ones to actually put the final restrictions on, because the data didn't substantiate that to me until the very end. And it's also one of the reasons that we were able to open up before most states, because the data was in a good place in our state. And I can thank Tennesseans for that, because the reality is social distancing plays a significant role in mitigating the spread of any virus that is spread by social contact. Social distancing, pure science, means that would not spread as rapidly. We had to get it to a place where it wouldn't spread. So from the very beginning, I thank Tennesseans for doing what they had to do and what they were asked to do. A couple things we did in state government that I think were very pivotal. There's a reason why we have, as tragic as loss of life has been in our state, and we have about 300 plus folks who have lost their lives in Tennessee, and to those families and those people, it's tragic. But we also are about the 41st or 42nd state in the country in our deaths per capita related to COVID. And we're the 16th largest state. So it's a very important number for me that we don't talk a lot about, but saving people's lives is what the decisions were about on the onset of this. We're setting up unified command was a very strategically appropriate thing to do. Stuart McWhirter did an incredible job pulling together health and TEMA and the military into a conference room every morning at 8:30 for the past 11 weeks, headed up by Stuart, but operating together. That was a very good decision that we made, and it's helped us to be much more efficient and nimble in our decision-making process than a lot of states. I talk to governors every week. I'm on calls twice a week. I know what's happening in other states, and I'm pleased with the way we attacked that. We also had a very early commitment to testing. And I believed from the very beginning that the states that tested the most would be able to mitigate the spread because of the knowledge that testing gives you. We were one of the first 5 states to test. Harvard just said last week we were one of only 7 states that really are testing enough to open up their economies. We have had a full-on commitment to testing, whether it's the general population or nursing homes, the DID population, our inmates, housing developments. We have worked really hard to make sure that we stay ahead of the curve on testing, because that's why companies can go out there and test. And the only thing I'll say about that is, to the private sector businesses out there, engage in this. Engage in testing. Get your folks tested. work with us. We will have the National Guard show up at your place and do testing with large, large sections of your employees. It's not only important for your employees to feel safe, but for your customers to feel safe, and for Tennessee to continue to have a very good picture of the state of the virus in our general population, and that can come from the private sector. So I encourage you to engage in the testing process. Enough about that piece of it. Now about moving forward, because we got to move forward. We got to get our economy moving. I'm proud of the fact that we started earlier than most were able to, but that's because our numbers were in a good spot. And now we're continuing to hold those numbers there. We want to continue to drive them down. Testing will allow us to do that. But we're working really hard to reopen our economy and not just lift restrictions, but to give, I want to give businesses tools and information. We want to work hand in hand with our businesses. Instead of heavy-handed with them. The Tennessee Pledge has been used by states across the country. We've been asked for information about that because it is such a resource, we believe, and it was created by you all, many of you in the private sector that engaged with Commissioner Ezell and our economic recovery group, which is maybe the most important piece in our unified command group. But we engaged the business community to develop these standards and these guidelines, and they've been really used. We do need to continue to encourage our businesses to engage in the Tennessee Pledge, and let me tell you why. I don't think it's because we need to make sure our companies are doing what they've got to do. I think Tennesseans, those who are concerned about this virus because it's real, those who want to go out and engage, they need to have a level of confidence that our businesses are protecting them and protecting their employees. That's why a company ought to take the Tennessee Pledge, engage, so that they can say, we're safe for you, because we need Tennesseans to believe that it's safe to go out there and engage in all of our companies and start this engine back up. So you all have been very helpful in us getting that Tennessee Pledge out there, and we're going to get our economy moving. We also want to protect businesses. I know that you all probably have had some conversation around liability and how it is that we not only make sure that people feel like they can be safe, but let companies believe that they're safe to be operating in an environment that could turn litigious. And we want you to open up we want companies to open up and to invite customers in without fear of inappropriate litigation and lawsuits. Those of you who don't know this, I have a pretty long history philosophically and otherwise with liability protection for companies. I was engaged in Governor Haslam's efforts and his tort reform work back when that was done 10 years ago or 8 years ago or so. I headed up something called Tennesseans for Economic Growth, and it was a C4 that worked to advance the idea and the legislation around tort reform. So I've had a long-standing belief that businesses need to be protected from frivolous and inappropriate litigation that ties them up, and we want to do that certainly here. We have been engaging actually with the chamber and other business groups, NFIB, and industry groups as well on the medical and healthcare side, talking about standards of care and pleading requirements and burden of proof, and elevating and making it an environment that is appropriate for businesses to operate in during this pandemic. So I wanted to just make a comment to that, because I think that that's a very important part of recovery, and y'all need to know that we're committed to that on behalf of business. The other thing, Susan Lynn was talking, and I'll finish up here. So I do actually have to drop off in a minute. I got on late. Oh, I didn't get on late, but I know y'all were a little behind. So, but I have a 10:30 call I got to get. But I'll address the budget. I think Susan, I caught the end of her comments. I'm a business person who knows that the most important job that I have as governor is to manage a budget in a fiscally responsible way. I just want you all to know that because the way government approaches budget has a profound impact on business. Because if we don't manage this budget correctly, it falls on the backs of businesses to ultimately create the revenues needed. That is not my plan. And my plan is to manage this budget in a way that continues to make us one of the lowest tax states in the country and one of the lowest debt states in the country. And that we just make the decisions that we have to make to balance the budget, and not on the backs of anyone else, but as a responsible government. I've told my team, you know, I ran a business for 25 years and we had some really, and one in particular, treacherous times that took incredibly difficult decisions to navigate through that time. I learned a lot. And I learned that you have to do what you have to do to make your business solvent through a crisis. In government, you know, in business, you don't do that. You just go bankrupt. In government, you got to raise taxes. That's a bad idea for me. So we will approach this with that in mind. I want you to know. And I also feel like I kind of know how to do this. There are a lot of things in this job that I had to learn on the fly. This one I have some experience with in my past. So we have a great challenge ahead of us, but I'm encouraged about how we can meet it. We have a great challenge ahead of us in appropriately spending the CARES Act funding that's coming down here. I want you to know that we are actively engaged right now, urgently, to develop a state program that will provide relief for businesses. That we are the conduit of CARES Act funding, that conduit will take a significant amount of that money and push it out to our businesses who have suffered the most as a result of this. We are committed to keeping our unemployment trust fund above $1 billion, so businesses don't have to pay additional tax related to unemployment. We're making a number of decisions that, because of my commitment to business and my knowledge that business and only business will create the jobs and the economy, the economic recovery that we need, then we have to do everything we can to protect them, to support them, to give them relief where, you know, if we close the business down, then we certainly have an obligation to give them some relief when we allow them to open back up, and that's my intent to do that. So we're working on all of those things right now. You'll be hearing a lot more about that in the days ahead, and I'll stop and see if we have a minute or two for questions, but I mostly want to thank this organization and its members, and you're working with us. Many of you have been engaged heavily with our team over the last 10, 12 weeks, so thank you for your help. I'm incredibly encouraged about where we are headed as a state. It's a very difficult economy. It's devastating what's happened to people. Businesses have borne the brunt of government decisions that were made, I believe, that were made at the right time with discernment. But nevertheless, the businesses bore the brunt of that, and Tennesseans who are unemployed as a result of it. But I'm committed to turning that around as rapidly and robustly as we can, and staying committed to protecting the lives of Tennesseans. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Governor. Would you like one question? We have a couple, but we certainly don't want to make you late for your next.
No, zing it. Yeah, zing it to me. I'm good. I'll drop off. I'll try to answer it quickly.
No, sure. Just how do you think we are progressing as a state, you know, relative to those in the Southeast and even those in other parts of the country?
Well, you know, I try to stay focused on Tennessee and not do a lot of comparing. I get asked all the time about comparing, but I can compare with you all and with Tennesseans. We have one of the lowest death per capita rates in the country. I already talked to you about that. We were the last state one of the, closing a state down and opening it up, those are relative terms. There's 50 states, they all did it 50 different ways. 4 or 5 of them didn't really do anything to close their economies. But, states like South Dakota, Alaska, Wyoming, they're very different types of states with population differences. But when I think about what Tennessee has done and how we compare with states in the eastern half of the United States, and especially the Southeast, our raw numbers for COVID cases are very good. Our deaths per capita rank high above all of those states. Our testing per capita is higher than 45 states in the country, and that would include all of the major states. We closed our economy, just about one of the last states in the country to issue a stay-at-home order, and the first state in the country to announce that stay-at-home order was going to be lifted. We have, I'm not sure that when we announced our 100% opening, lifted all restrictions on restaurants and retail, we may have been the second or third state in the country to do that. So what I would say is, I'm really proud of the way we have tried to manage this, saving the lives of Tennesseans and really making an effort to save the livelihoods of Tennesseans at the same time. We still got 450,000 people unemployed. So it's been devastating, but I am encouraged with the way we've navigated it. And I hope that because of that, and because of our strategies, we'll actually have a return and a rebound in our economy that is a leading indicator in the country.
Well, thank you, Governor, for your confident and your competent leadership. You've really made us as Tennesseans proud through this process, and you've really displayed integrity through this process too. And thank you again for your comments about our unemployment trust fund, and especially the liability piece, which we'll be talking about later. Thank you again for joining us. And we really do appreciate all you've done for the state, Governor.
Thank you. Y'all have a great weekend. And let me just remind everybody, I certainly, as Governor, I want to say this. It's Memorial Day weekend, a lot of fun opening up summer. Maria and I visited 5 Gold Star families this past week. In those cases, it was 5 women and children who had lost their dad, their husband in military service. It was a great reminder to me of just what this weekend is and the honor that is due those who've made the ultimate sacrifice. So join me in that as we all enjoy freedom and liberty because of that. And the lives that we have here in Tennessee. The Lord has blessed us greatly, and we have much to be thankful for. And I certainly am one that is, and join with you as we celebrate this weekend. So thank you. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you very much again, Governor. It's really an honor to have Governor Lee with us, but also an honor to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Timothy Grafe from MTSU. He received his PhD in marketing from Penn State, and he taught marketing research, has taught marketing research at Middle Tennessee State since 1992. So he's certainly seen some ebbs and flows in our economy. He currently serves as the director of the Office of Consumer Research at MTSU, where he oversees the Tennessee Consumer Outlook surveys and the Tennessee Business Barometer surveys, which are conducted in partnership with the Tennessee Chamber. Dr. Grafe, I see you're already sharing your screen. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm trying to. Yes. Can you see me and the screen?
We can see your screen, sir.
Okay. Well, I guess that's all we need to make sure we can see. Yeah. Thank you. My name's Tim Grafe. I teach marketing at MTSU. And I saw on your schedule you had down for this time slot an economist from MTSU. I'm not an economist. My area is marketing, but I'm director of the Office of Consumer Research, and we do a lot of research on people's perceptions of the economy. And that's important because people make decisions based on their perceptions, and now those decisions and actions then impact the economy. So our Office of Consumer Research, and there's our website if anybody wanted to check us out. We do two major sets of surveys every year. We do the Tennessee Business Barometer surveys, which is where we measure business leaders around Tennessee, their perceptions of the economy. We do those 4 times a year, January, April, July, and October. And what I'll share with you is some of the results from the most recent survey we did in April. And then we also do our Tennessee Consumer Outlook surveys. And we do those 4 times a year in March, June, September, and December. And I'll share some of the results that we found from our most recent March surveys. Now, when we asked the business leaders this most recent round of surveys in April, what was on their mind, what challenges they're facing, what's concerning them, typically, well, this shows the top 5 issues or concerns. Typically, staffing and rising healthcare costs are number 1 and number 2 at the top of the list. But those 2 have actually declined. And what we see, obviously, was an increase in economic uncertainty and increase in concerns with respect to profitability, which is obviously a result to the coronavirus and the COVID-19. So we saw a little bit of shifting in concerns with business leaders. And this chart shows the overall business barometer index that we calculate. We started doing this back in 2015, and there's a number of different subcomponents to it. There is the overall index measure, which is made up of their perceptions of the current economy, also then the perceptions of the future economy, their perceptions of their own business, their own firm, and issues with respect to employment, ability to find and hire good employees. And if you can't see on the far right-hand side of the screen, what I did was I enlarged that far right-hand side just so everybody can see the important parts of what we found this most recent survey in April. As you would expect, there was a huge drop in confidence, huge drop in outlook. This was the first time ever that the overall measure for the Business Barometer Index was negative. And the way we calculate our scores is we simply just take the percentage of positive responses, subtract from that the percentage of negative responses, and that gives us our net score. So a positive score would mean that there are more positive responses than negative. A negative score would mean there's more negative than positive. And a 0 score would mean that there's the same number, an equal number of positive and negative. And this is the first time that we see the index, the perception of the current economy, and the perception of their business and firm in the negative range. And that's not unexpected given what we've been going through. In fact, when we asked them about the coronavirus and the COVID-19, 96% of the business leaders said that they were at least somewhat concerned or even very concerned that it will have a significant negative effect on the US economy. And all 89% said that they were at least somewhat concerned that this virus was going to have a significant negative effect on their firm and their business. So it's not surprising that the outlook, the overall index measure was so negative. Now, I do want you to look at in the middle of the screen there, highlighted in green, there is reason for hope, because that kind of orange looking measure, that is the future expectations sub-index. And that increased from October to January, but it also increased again from January to April. So even when we were starting to see all the possible negative effects of this virus, and people were noticing that, yes, the economy really is bad because we had to shut everything down, it's a very good sign that business leaders, even in April, they said, even though everything else is going down, they said, no, they're actually an increase in their optimism, their outlook for the future. So they were an increase in the number of business leaders who expect to actually improve in the near future. Well, why would we see that? Well, when we took a look at our surveys and took a look at the responses, obviously there's a lot of federal support, a lot of money being given to businesses and consumers just to kind of prop up the economy and fill the gaps where businesses have had to shut down. I think a lot of business leaders also realize that there are very strong economic fundamentals underneath this economy. This is somewhat an artificially, well, actually it is an artificially imposed shutdown in the sense that it's not the result of any kind of economic policies or any kind of structural problems with the economy. It's not a downturn in the economy because of poor management, because of mismanagement or bad economic policies. It's just being told you have to shut down and consumers being told you cannot go spend. So what we're seeing is that in typical recoveries after shutdowns, what we're trying to do is encourage consumers to spend. But as we've heard previously mentioned before today, especially from the governor, it's not a matter of encouraging them to spend, it's a matter of allowing them to spend. So I think a lot of businesses realize that we got into this pretty quickly because of the shutdown. If we can allow businesses to open up, then we can get out of it relatively quickly too. We also did find in our surveys strong, very high positive approval of President Trump and Governor Lee, the way they responded to the crisis. So those were some of the reasons why business leaders were optimistic for the future amid this severe economic downturn. We also noticed that they are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. When we asked them, when do you expect this to end and for you to be able to get back to business as usual? Over half, 55%, expect business as usual by July 1st, which is actually a somewhat optimistic number right there. And those numbers show the cumulative percentage as we head toward the end of the year. So almost all, 84%, expect to be back to normal, back to business as usual by the end of the year, which is a big number, a very big optimistic number, almost all expecting at least by the end of the year. And there were 2% who said that we'll never get back to business as usual. Another reason for optimism is related to consumers. And we see that consumers are optimistic for the future. Their perceptions of the current economy are obviously negative. They feel that things are bad right now, but we actually do see indications of consumers, just like businesses I showed you, are actually optimistic for the future. In fact, the Conference Board, they do their national measures of consumer confidence, and they found that their expectations index, which is a measure of what consumers think about the future, not the current, but the future, it actually improved from March to April. So that's the same thing we saw with respect to Tennessee business leaders. And we have also found the same thing when we surveyed Tennessee consumers. They are actually improving, becoming more optimistic for the future. So this chart shows from the same time period from 2015 to today, results from our Tennessee Consumer Outlook Index. And if you look on the chart, after 2016, you see a big increase, and then it kind of bounces around a little bit. But then after December, when we did our March of this year survey, consumers started to notice the obvious negative effects of this virus and COVID-19 on the economy. So we see the overall index, we see their perceptions of the current economy, current situation, and purchasing situation going down. But I put the little green smiley face there just to highlight, just like with businesses and just like with the national measures for the Conference Board, we see amid all this economic downturn an actually increase in consumers' optimism, realizing or perceiving that, yeah, things are bad right now, but actually increasing hope that it will get better in the future. Now, how did businesses respond based on our survey? Well, they responded obviously the way we would expect them to respond. They cut their expenses, they reduced travel, they canceled or postponed or delayed events with their customers, with their fellow employees. They limited in-person contact between customers and employees. They had a lot of their employees working from home remotely, and they reduced staffing. A number of them temporary reductions and a number of them permanent reductions also. And this issue of working remotely, we hear a lot of people talking about how we're never going to get back to normal. We'll never see the way business done the way it was before. And I don't know, that may be true, that may not be true, but there are some issues, potential problems with working remotely too. So even if we do open up the economy completely and we tell everybody, okay, you can go back to work, but you just need to work from home, there is still a negative ripple effect of working remotely, because there are many daily activities and expenses that just go along with going to work. And there are a lot of businesses and service providers out there that rely on people just engaged in that activity of going to work. We're not driving as much. We don't go to work. We don't buy gas. We're not paying for parking. We're not buying meals. We're not eating out for lunch. We're not going to dinner. We don't have to go to the dry cleaner because we're not wearing nice, expensive, nice suits and nice clothes because we don't have to go to the office anymore. I even saw this morning at luggage manufacturers. They're having a hard time because people aren't traveling and they just have no need of luggage anymore. So they're having a difficult time. So even working remotely can have negative effects on many businesses that rely on other people just engaged in that activity of going to work. Now, another thing, which is a very positive note, which I highlighted in green there from our surveys, was when we asked business leaders if their firm or business had donated money or time to charities to help fight this virus and COVID-19. A good majority, 59%, said that their firm had already donated time and money. And I think it was about 20% more said that their firm was probably planning on doing that in the future. So that's something to feel good about. That was a definite positive sign to see that businesses are trying to help each other and help the community around them get through this tough situation. So the final word, I would expect to see a recovery beginning in the third and fourth quarters. The caveat being if businesses are allowed to reopen. And economically, as we've heard, the sooner the better, because there are many consumers and businesses who are losing future spending power every day the economy stays shut down. So it's not a matter of just, we've put everything on hold, and when we open up again, everybody's going to pick off right where they were before, because a lot of businesses and a lot of consumers, they're still having to pay rent, they're still having to pay utilities, buy insurance, still having to buy food. So the longer the shutdown goes on, the more those consumers and businesses are losing that future spending power. So the sooner the better economically. And like the governor was pointing to, recoveries are stimulated by consumer confidence. But what we're finding now, there's an interesting twist on this notion of confidence. We're kind of coming up with a different definition or different view of it. In a typical recovery, we're dealing with confidence to spend. And it's a financial concern. So when consumers are feeling reluctant or concerned about spending, it may be a financial situation. They're asking themselves, can I afford it? So in a typical recovery, we're trying to get consumers to feel confident to spend. But in this current situation, it's actually confidence while spending. Because we see a lot of consumers out there who are ready, willing, and able to spend. So their concern is not so much financial, it's more safety. So they're not asking themselves, can I afford it? They're asking themselves, will I be safe while I'm spending, while I'm shopping? So it's important, as the governor mentioned, businesses taking steps to follow health guidelines, but it's also important that businesses communicate with customers, let their customers know and their clients know what steps are being taken to ensure safety, because it's all well and good to follow the steps and to take all the precautions, but it doesn't do a lot of consumers any good if we don't know that the business is following those steps and taking those precautions. Because I know there are a lot of consumers out there who, even if you tell them, look, okay, restaurants are all open up for 100% occupancy, have at it. There are a lot of consumers who may still not want to go because they may not feel safe. They may have the money, but they still are unsure about the safety issues of going out. So the bottom line, business leaders and consumers are hopeful for a recovery. So that's a good sign. I would say consumers want to spend when they're allowed to and when they feel comfortable and safe spending. And if anybody wanted to contact us or check out any of our previous reports, our Office of Consumer Research website is mtsu.edu/consumer. That's my email. And when you go onto our website, the mtsu.edu/consumer, on the left-hand side, you'll see links, then drop-down box arrows for the business barometer surveys, as well as the Consumer Outlook Index surveys. And if you wanted to see previous reports, more detailed results, you can go to our website and find them. Well, I think that's all I needed to share, unless there were any questions about any of the results that we had.
Dr. Gray, thank you very much. That was very, very informative. And I do want to encourage all business leaders to participate in the survey that's sent out, the barometer survey. It's very important and it provides tremendous, very helpful feedback for the business community and also our elected officials that we share with. We'll move on now to our 11, we're running a little bit behind schedule, but we'll be able to make up our panel discussion regarding the Tennessee Business Recovery and Safe Harbor Coalition. And really the purpose of this is to dig a little bit deeper and explain why business liability reforms are so crucially important for when the legislature returns on June the 1st. And today we have a number of different sectors with us today who will share their insight, some, even situations that they may have heard about or why for their specific industry, why liability reform is so important. We have Jim Brown with NFIB, Roland Myers with the Tennessee Retail Federation, also Emily Leroy with us today. I think, let's see, Emily. And also Rob Mortensen with the Tennessee Hospitality and Tourism Association. So earlier today, I saw an article from The Hill that noted a prominent attorney had said if states or the federal government does not do something about this, this could be the equivalent of asbestos litigation in the 1970s, kind of how rampant it could become. So, excuse me, with that said, Jim Brown, we'll turn to you first to provide us some explanation. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brad. I saw the same article in The Hill that Lee Harrell shared with us, and I think there are 1,300 pandemic-related claims that have been filed so far, and that's one of the reasons that we're here. First, I want to thank the Chamber for all they're doing. Bradley, Ryan, Lauren, you all are doing just a terrific job, and so is the Chamber staff, Susie, Carolyn, Kelly, Jonah, Rosie, Susan, everyone. We really appreciate this, and this has been a very optimistic, forward-thinking program you've put together here the last 2 days. So it's really great leadership. Thank you. NFIB, just a couple things, Bradley and everyone. NFIB did a survey earlier this month that found nearly 70% of small business owners are concerned about liability claims increases, and only 6% are not at all concerned. So that survey got our attention, as have a lot of the phone calls and emails that I've been getting from people in that 70%, just like I think Bradley, Rob, Roland, and Emily are getting. So one of the first calls I got was from an East Tennessee member who said he's concerned about the legal exposure of the customer sneezing on the customer. But what caught my attention was his scenario that he shared of a patron who shows up coughing. The manager is concerned about the employees and customers, ask the patron to leave to protect everyone. The patron says, well, I've got bad allergies or emphysema or something, and my lawyer will call your lawyer. So that first call, that was one of the first calls that got my attention. And Rob, we share that member. Our member wants assurances that he's protected, and rightly so. That said, we don't want to let bad actors off the hook. No one should. Plaintiffs should have legal recourse when there's gross negligence. That's a standard of recklessness that's in our Tennessee Code annotated. So I think we all are on the same page with that in the business community. But we've got 6,000 members at NFIB, and most of them are very small, and they're very vulnerable right now. They don't have in-house counsel. The vast majority can't afford to hire a lawyer to defend their business and reputations in court. So they often settle because the alternative, closing the business, is obviously worse. We saw that with a lot of ADA lawsuits a few years ago here in Nashville and Memphis. We know states are acting. Utah, North Carolina so far, of course. And I just saw today, Bradley, that our governors in Oklahoma and Wyoming have signed pandemic-related liability protection. And we need to act here in Tennessee. And I think our coalition of 30 groups in the business, healthcare, insurance, and higher ed sectors were united on that. So all of us are watching what's happening at the federal level closely. NFIB, we were very pleased to see our Attorney General Herbert Slatery co-sign a 21 state coalition letter back in, I think it was May 11th. And that letter urges Congress to enact specific liability protections by adopting a common sense framework for protecting businesses while ensuring the victims are able to seek legal recourse, legal redress, and compensation when appropriate. So in short, NFIB, we believe the workers' comp system is the avenue for COVID-19 claims, but with no presumptions, like we're seeing in California and elsewhere. We believe Congress in Tennessee should grant businesses immunity from coronavirus-related litigation, except in the cases of gross negligence. And the plaintiff has suffered serious physical injury resulting in hospitalization or death. And that's really it. And I'll close by saying I'm really encouraged by that our governor and our lieutenant governor and our House Speaker and our leaders, our majority leaders, they understand the importance of this issue. So that's very encouraging. But Bradley, that's our story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right. Thank you, Jim. And I would urge if the participants, if you all have questions, feel free to send them to the administrator, and we'll try to get to those. Next, Emily Leroy with the Tennessee Fuel and Convenience Store Association. I know you all, even though deemed as kind of an essential businesses at first, have been out there operating, and we'd love to hear your perspective.
Thank you, Bradley, and thanks for asking me to be on this distinguished panel of lobbyists. I appreciate it. So, of course, fuel and convenience stores were considered essential businesses and stayed open for the duration, providing food and fuel for customers in Tennessee. And we like to say we provide the fuel that keeps Tennessee moving, and we continue to do that. And these businesses that stayed open worked as hard as they could to provide a safe working environment for their employees and for their customers. But something I think maybe a lot of people don't realize is that was a moving target. Starting March 13th, every day there was a new standard. There was a new best idea on how to manage staying open during the quarantine and those kind of things. And, we feel like that businesses that took the risk and stayed open, providing essential services to Tennesseans, should not be further penalized down the road through frivolous litigation. And I think that we all know that there are a lot of businesses out there right now in Tennessee that are on the edge, that may not make it. And a frivolous lawsuit that's aimed only at getting a settlement could shove a lot of those businesses over the line, and they might not make it because of it. We consider this the top priority of business right now. The most important thing that we can do to give confidence to business owners to continue to operate, to bring customers back into their stores, and to open up Tennessee to continue to do business. I think there is a lot of continued fear out there, both by business owners and consumers. Are we safe? Are we operating safely? And with the Tennessee Pledge and other, actions that business owners are taking, we're trying to provide that confidence to the consumer. Come on back. We're ready. We're open. But we desperately need to have confidence that our state legislators and the administration are behind us as well, that they are going to provide that safe harbor for us to have confidence to stay open and continue operating. And I'd be glad to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Emily. Greatly appreciate that. Next, Roland Myers with the Tennessee Retail Association. Roland, I know a number of retailers as well were essential, and you all have gotten kudos for the work that you all have done in kind of establishing a number of best practices and everything, but also there's so many consumers that come into your facility. We'd love to hear your perspective.
Thanks, Bradley. Appreciate being here. And I couldn't have said it better than Jim and Emily. And you're right, we've been open since the very beginning. We've never closed. We've operated with restrictions, some of which we put on ourselves to keep our employees and our customers safe, and we're still operating under those self-imposed restrictions as well as some at the local, state, and federal level, all with the intention to keep our employees and our customers as safe and as healthy as possible. And one thing I would like to say is just pick up on something the previous speaker, the MTSU professor, mentioned is he's exactly right. It's not only that you have to do the right things, you have to be seen as doing the right things. Those go hand in hand, because you want to give confidence to your employees that they have a safe workplace, and you want to give the customer the feeling that they can come into your place of business and be healthy and be safe. And again, what Jim and Emily, and I suspect you and Rob will say is exactly right, is that we just want some protection from bad actors. As Jim said, if somebody is doing something they shouldn't be doing, and there's a legitimate case, we're certainly in support of the local law enforcement and district attorneys going after those folks. But for the businesses that are doing the right thing, have been operating under all these restrictions for the last couple of months, we just want to be sure that we have the protections in place that some states are getting right now, and shield us from frivolous lawsuits and just people out to make a quick buck at our expense. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Roland. And your powerful statement elicited a very unique response from some attendees wondering how it's possible that a beard could make you look even more handsome. So thank you for your comments. And next we'll move to Rob Mortensen, and Rob is joining us here in-house in downtown Nashville. And certainly the hospitality and tourism industry has really been hit hard, if not one of the probably hardest hit sectors around this. So Rob, please share with us some insight you all have.
Thanks, Bradley. I didn't realize why you invited me in today and not Jim and Roland until I noticed the beards. And then I realized that was the reason. Emily, I have no idea why you didn't get an invite, because you should have given, no beard. So, well, hey, thank you, Bradley. Appreciate you taking the time.
I don't have a beard and I'm just covering it up with makeup.
It looks great. It looks great, Emily.
How's that?
Well, restaurants, as you know, took the hit on the front side of this. We went in early and were shut down, and they've been challenged. We've got 12,000 restaurants statewide. We've got a huge number of hotels, and then we've also got a huge number of attractions across the state, all depending on people going back and visiting. And so there is a very big sense, especially around our restaurants, of nervousness when it comes to going back into business, because they are very much worried about folks going in and asking why one person might not have had a mask on, and maybe that's the reason that they caught COVID. So I think you see that our restaurants are also very much concerned around the fiscal piece. And so you've got this cycle where folks are concerned not only about going back and making certain that people will go to the restaurants, but they're also concerned around who's going to come in and sue them. And I think to Emily's point, and I think Roland may have made this point as well, there's a lot of folks hurt out there right now, and they're looking for a way to jump back into this in a very safe sort of way. And these frivolous lawsuits are a huge, huge concern for our folks statewide. So I think as we move forward, we've got to figure this out. We've got to get folks back into our restaurants. We've got to get our restaurants back open, and we've got to build that confidence. And this is the way that we're going to build that confidence. Thanks, Bradley.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. We've covered, I know in terms of more detail, our goal is for the legislature, once they convene, is to present legislation that I know all of us in the coalition that we have been working toward. And that coalition consists of about 30 different trade associations. I think it's one of the largest ones I've ever seen in various industries, employing about 2 million Tennesseans. As you all think, I think Jim outlined a number of kind of critical pieces that we want in there regarding the legislation. And that includes kind of a gross negligence standard, that we want to make sure that the courts do know how to interpret these type of cases whenever they get to them. I do want to shift just a little bit though and ask you all, we've gotten a lot of questions regarding, and this is relative to business recovery, the enhanced unemployment payments that are out there right now. How are those affecting your industry, and what are you all kind of hearing from your employers about whenever you're requesting employees to come back to work and things like that? And maybe we'll go back through Jim if you want to provide some comments.
I only caught the second part of that, Bradley. I am sorry, because I was looking at something.
it's fine. Basically, the enhanced unemployment benefits. How is that impacting? What are you hearing from your members regarding that?
A whole lot. The $600 that runs per week, the federal pandemic unemployment assistance, that runs through July 31. That has, and we just did a survey, and I think and I'm trying to remember the number, but it's about 13 or 14% of our members already report that's already occurred where someone declined to come back to work specifically because of that issue, and it's growing. The good news is that through the chamber, NFIB, and some other groups, we really pushed hard for this. We talked to the Department of Labor and Workforce Development early on and said this is going to be an issue. This is why we flagged this, tried to get an amendment passed in the CARES Act. That was a 48 vote. Senator Blackburn and Alexander supported it. But we need support, we need help. And to their credit, through everything they're going through in the department, they put that refusal to work form as part of a resource for employers. And as of yesterday, Denise with the department told us on the ERG that 1,300 employers have already utilized that form to report refusal to work. So it's a big deal. The reasons in the CARES Act that you don't have to come back to work, they're very specific. That's also in the FAQs on the department website, but it's good stuff that I think we all did together because we knew this was coming. But it's an issue, and it's a huge issue for Rob's folks and some of our members in the hospitality side. So we got to get them back to work, and we'll stay on it.
Emily, how about you in the fuel and convenience store industry?
Well, of course, we stayed open, so a lot of people continued to be employed in our stores during the quarantine. But I will say, virtually all of my members reported that they had very little problem with employees not wanting to come to work. I think that says a lot about how concerned the business owners were in making sure that their businesses remained safe, that they were cleaned properly. But I had very few reports of employees not wanting to come to work. I will also say that those additional unemployment checks seem to be working, especially out in the rural areas. My members report that they can tell that people are spending that money, putting it back into the economy, which I think is a very good thing.
Very good. Thank you for that. Roland, retail?
Well, we've stayed, as I said, we've stayed open. And in fact, we're right now hiring. We're one of the few sectors that's growing because people obviously still need to get food and pharmaceuticals and fuel and so forth. So we've been not only holding steady with our employment numbers, but actually increasing a little bit. We've been working with Rob Mortensen and Rob Eichert and others to try to shift displaced hospitality workers over to retail, for one example. So I think that's it's something that's important for folks who are hurting right now. I would say, at least in the retail community, like Emily, I haven't heard a lot about it, a lot of concern about it, just because we seem to be holding our own right now. But certainly for Jim and other groups out there, it's something we really need to keep our eye on and be sure that people have the right combination of incentives to come back to work, but also be able to buy the things and to do the things they need to do while they might be furloughed or before they can get back to their regular paycheck.
Thank you very much. And Rob, we'll go to you, and I may ask you to elaborate a little bit more on what Roland talked about, the initiative that you all partnered, I believe, with Unified Command to help dislocated workers.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a great effort that Rob Eichert and Roland Myers, myself, with the Department of Tourist Development, and at the time, Commissioner Ezell. But we knew that we were losing jobs, and we also knew that others needed folks. So we wanted to create that path for folks to not have to be without work for any given time. And so we through the department, we created this portal, which folks were able to log in and say, hey, I'm looking for a job, and then immediately be connected with an employer. So it was an amazing kind of a response that happened naturally, given the fact that we were spending time together trying to figure out solutions to what was happening at the time. I do think that the unemployment payments have an interesting impact on our industry. And for the most part, most of the folks out there that are unemployed are from our industry. We're the one of the largest employers in the state when it comes to hospitality. And this really hit our industry the hardest. Interestingly, so when you're talking about restaurants going back into business, they're looking at how they're going to make it, right? And so for the most part, a lot of our restaurants, they act as families, and they understand the people working need to get paid. And so there's a calculation around how long they can be out of business, allowing their folks to take unemployment because they know at 50%, they're not going to make money anyway. So do they re-employ their folks, get them back to work only to fire them? And so it's a challenge. It really is a challenge. And I think for a lot of restaurants, they know that this unemployment's helping them. And so they've stayed closed. So I think a lot of our restaurants right now are looking at this thinking, all right, so if our folks continue to get employment, they're getting paid, we probably wouldn't make business or make enough money to stay open anyway. Maybe we stay closed. So we've got to build consumer confidence to the point where they're going back to the restaurants. So these restaurant owners know they can open back up, and we can get these folks off of unemployment and back into their jobs.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Rob. I would ask you too, I know there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of restaurants have been able to serve alcohol, and that has helped them tremendously.
Yep.
Are you all working on any sort of efforts, I guess, in the legislature when they can reconvene on that?
So what we would like to see is that last through the end of the year. We know restaurants are not going to be back up and running in 2 months, 3 months, 5 months. They've got a big hole to dig out of. We know this has helped them tremendously. We know this has not hurt, the liquor sales all throughout the state. And so it's only been a win-win for everybody. We would like to see that extend throughout the end of the year. We are talking, with the administration and the legislature around that to see what options we have. We think that this would help the restaurants get through this year and back on their feet. So that is kind of our hope.
Yeah, thank you. I do want to say thank all of our panelists, Jim Brown, Emily Leroy, Roland Myers, and Rob Mortensen. Do also want to acknowledge and wish you all the best on our upcoming Memorial Day holiday, to take time to observe it and give thanks for those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. I also want to acknowledge for this program, I know we've gotten a lot of compliments on it, but Carolyn Davis is here to my left, and she's not going to shift the camera over to her, but Carolyn's done a great job of emceeing this and cracking the whip, everything to keep us all keep all this moving. But we greatly appreciate Ryan and Lauren too, their work on putting all this agenda together, and we will keep you all informed as the legislature they begin activity next week. There is a lot that's going to happen. There's a lot of work to do, a lot of effort that we're going to put toward our business liability protections, and just like Jim said, unemployment dollars that help to put money into our economy to spur economic growth, help employees, and also keep employers' tax burden low by us not triggering down on higher cost tables. So with that said, also want to thank our presenting sponsors, Vanderbilt, Chemours, NHC, and also Waller for the donation of the great space up here. You all have a great weekend, and we thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bradley. Happy Memorial Day, everybody.
Happy Memorial Day.